The January 6th hearings forced a judge to delay the sedition trial for 5 top members of the Proud Boys, a far-right group tied to the insurrection. That case will now begin in December.
A federal judge delayed the trial at the request of both prosecutors and defense attorneys who said the hearings were interfering with efforts to prepare their cases. The Department of Justice says the committee has withheld witness transcripts that could help with their case. The Proud Boys have also been prominently featured in the hearings with videos before and during the insurrection on display. Of the more than 840 people arrested for storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 28 are members of the Proud Boys.
Well, we do want to go more in depth about the Proud Boys, who they are, and also the group's alleged actions on January 6th. Joining us now with more on this is Rudabeh Kishi, the Director of Research and Innovation for the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, or ACLED. The nonprofit group collects data on political violence and events all around the world. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The Proud Boys describe themselves as a gentleman's drinking club. The reality suggests something other than that. So in your own words, who are they? What do they want? And what do they do?
So at ACLED, we track political violence and protests around the world. So despite what the Proud Boys might call themselves, they're one of the most active groups engaging in demonstrations in the U.S. In fact, they're the most active of the over 190 different far-right groups that we've tracked. And their engagement in demonstrations is disproportionately violent, with protests that they engage in turning violent nearly 20% of the time. So for comparison, other protests in the U.S. turn violent less than 3% of the time, meaning that protests with Proud Boys turn violent nearly 9 times as often. And what's been really worrying is that they've only become more active and more violent since January 6th.
Wow. So that was going to be what I was going to ask. Is this something that, we see a headline here and there, and we hear the name Proud Boys, every, random whatever. But how prevalent is this in other groups, too? Because Proud Boys isn't the only group that is kind of involved in this.
That's right. There are quite a number of them. And we see new groups emerge, regularly.
And what does that say about the society that we live in now, that this is becoming kind of more mainstream?
I think it is really pointing to how polarized the environment is, and how it breeds this type of engagement when it's different types of groups that are able to mobilize, and we see quite a number of them.
There's 1/6 committee also says it has testimony about the Proud Boys' intentions on January 6th. Let's play this soundbite and get your reaction on the other side.
Fact that the vice president's life was in danger. A recent court filing by the Department of Justice explains that a confidential informant from the Proud Boys told the FBI that the Proud Boys would have killed Mike Pence if given a chance.
So let me ask you this. What is the basic profile of a Proud Boy? Generally speaking, I get it. What part of the country do they come from? Age, race, income, educational level, what, as we speak, I'll stop there. What's the profile of an average Proud Boy? I know that's a tough question, but paint in broad strokes, what kind of people are susceptible to joining a group like this?
So I'll preface with, this isn't exactly what we track at ACLED. We track political violence and protest. So we track these outcomes of what these groups do. But in terms of who the members are, we see it's Proud Boys specifically is men, and we see kind of a younger profile. But at ACLED we track kind of the type of engagement that they then engage in once they're recruited and mobilized.
Gotcha. Because I Googled them today just to see the latest, and there were reports out of North Carolina where they disrupted a pride event at a library in the small little beach town of Wilmington, North Carolina. So who are the targets for their rage? Is it race? Is it sexuality? Is it politics, or all the above?
It's a version of all of the above, especially in the aftermath of January 6th. Initially, we saw a decline in engagement by the Proud Boys and a lot of other far-right groups, especially with heightened legal scrutiny around those types of groups. But then, come summer of last year, we really began to see these groups, including the Proud Boys, really engaging in around new drivers and trying to kind of co-opt new populations, especially those on the right, whether it's networking with other far-right groups or engaging with the right more largely, whether it's the religious right when it comes to abortion or anti-abortion and anti-LGBT activity, or whether it's parents, for example. We saw that last summer around mobilization around opposition to critical race theory. So that has really been a strategic move by groups like the Proud Boys to really begin widening their reach, whether it's becoming more prominent within mainstream media and also when it comes to mobilization. And we saw that kind of happening hand in hand with, a proliferation of Proud Boys chapters, for example, around the U.S.
Right. So as we mentioned, several members of the Proud Boys are charged with sedition with the 1/6 committee and accused of plotting violence at the Capitol. So how have the group's numbers across the country changed since the insurrection? I know that you said that there have been more groups kind of popping up all over the place, but maybe the Proud Boys specifically.
Again, we don't track that specifically at ACLED, but other groups have been documenting, an increase in the number of chapters. For example, the Proud Boys has a national presence, but then they really have been shifting their focus to more localized engagement, and that has been, really fueled by local chapters being established around the country.
I think the most chilling thing that you've said so far is that these groups have become more active and more violent since January 6th, despite the fact that hundreds of rioters from 1/6 have been charged, despite the ongoing 1/6 committee hearings, which is kind of laying bare everything that that committee has has learned about what happened that day. What do you think is in the culture or in our politics right now where these kind of right-wing groups feel emboldened? 1/6 didn't seem like a warning sign. It seems like the beginning of something.
I think that it points to some of the legality that and lack thereof around enforcing or stopping the enforcement of some of these groups and their engagement. I'm not suggesting that anyone should be kept from protesting in a peaceful way. That's obviously a constitutional right. But when it comes to outright violence, when we're seeing an increase in kind of contentious demonstrations where two opposing sides show up, especially when the sides are armed, that poses a risk not only for the demonstrators but also for bystanders, for journalists, and I think that those are the types of worries that we should really kind of be considering when thinking about what these types of groups are allowed to do.
And we did see Adam Kinzinger on the 1/6 committee just a few days ago warn of more political violence in our country. Chilling. And as you said, it's a problem that is growing and intensifying, which is scary for a lot of reasons. Rudabeh Kishi, thank you so much for giving us some time and some insight today. We appreciate it, and the important work that you and your colleagues are doing right now. It's a perilous time for the country. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.